No one remembers who sent the invitations. They simply arrived, handwritten on aged parchment, sealed with black wax, bearing no return address. The message was simple. You are invited to a séance at Blackwood Manor. Midnight. All will be revealed. There were 6 of them, 6 curious souls who couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. Paranormal investigators, skeptics, thrill seekers, each with their own reason for stepping through that rotting doorway. None of them would leave the same way. The house had been abandoned for decades, its tragic past buried beneath layers of silence and shadow. It was once the home of Esther Blackwood, a notorious medium in the 19th century whose final séance ended in madness and bloodshed. The event was so horrifying that even whispers of it had faded into myth. At midnight, the 6 sat around an antique oak table, the candlelight flickering against their anxious faces, hands linked, breath held. The air grew heavy, pressing in on them like unseen fingers. Then the séance began. None of them would survive the night. Long before the final séance, Blackwood Manor was already whispered about in hushed voices. Built in 1832, it was a grand estate, home to the enigmatic Esther Blackwood, a woman whose beauty was matched only by the mystery surrounding her. She was a spiritualist, a medium of great renown, sought after by aristocrats and scholars alike. But those who entered her house did not always leave. Rumors spread of séances gone wrong, of voices that did not belong to the dead, but to something else, something ancient, something hungry. Survivors spoke of whispered deals, of entities that offered forbidden knowledge in exchange for something unspeakable. Then, in the winter of 1876, she performed her final séance. It was meant to be her greatest triumph, a direct communion with what she called the other mind. She gathered 12 guests, each desperate to hear the voices of their lost loved ones. What they summoned instead was neither a spirit nor a ghost, but something beyond comprehension. The bodies of the guests were found mutilated, their faces contorted in expressions of unholy terror. Esther Blackwood was never seen again. Some claimed she had been taken. Others believed she had become part of whatever they had summoned. Whatever the truth was, the house was sealed off, its doors locked, its name erased from polite society. But the legend endured. More than a century later, the 6 invited guests sat in that very same room, unaware of what they were about to awaken. The 6 guests stepped through the decayed threshold, their breaths visible in the unnaturally cold air. Their host, Victor Harrow, greeted them with a knowing smile, his deep-set eyes glinting beneath the dim chandelier light. He was a historian, obsessed with Blackwood Manor and the mysteries surrounding its last known ritual. Tonight, he had gathered them here for a reason. Each guest had their reasons for accepting Victor's invitation. Dr. Eleanor Crane, a parapsychologist seeking proof of life beyond death. Marcus Vale, a skeptic determined to debunk the supernatural. Lillian Moore, a journalist chasing the next great horror piece. Alan Wren, a psychic sensitive to energies most dared not acknowledge. Sophia Bellamy, a thrill seeker drawn to the forbidden. And Father Gabriel, a priest with secrets of his own. As they took their seats, Victor placed a stack of yellowed papers in front of them. The original séance transcripts from 1876. The last words written were smudged in something brown, something dried. We opened the door. We cannot close it. Victor's voice was steady as he spoke. We will reenact the séance exactly as it was performed that night. If we do this correctly, We may speak with Esther Blackwood herself, but something else was listening, and it had been waiting for a long, long time. Victor's voice dropped into a whisper, guiding the seance step by step, his fingers trembling slightly as he read the incantation from the crumbling parchment. Alan, the psychic, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His breath hitched, his pupils dilated. "She's here," Alan murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. A loud bang shattered the silence. The candle's flame surged high, stretching unnaturally before snuffing out entirely, plunging the room into complete darkness. Lillian let out a strangled gasp. Marcus, ever the skeptic, fumbled for his phone's flashlight, but his fingers trembled too much to unlock it. Then, in the silence, a single voice rasped from the darkness. "Why have you come?" Alan clutched his chest, gasping for air. "It's not just her," he wheezed. "There's something else with her. Something older." Victor's hands shook as he reached for the parchment again. "We must close the ritual," he stammered. "Now." But the entity had no intention of letting them go. The knocking returned, louder this time, not from the table, but from inside the walls. The guests turned as one toward the mirror, where something was clawing at the glass from the other side. The reflection of the seance table was wrong. Their seats were empty, yet figures sat there, watching. Then, one by one, their reflections began to smile. Victor fumbled with the parchment, desperately trying to recite the closing rites, but his voice cracked under the weight of the growing terror. "The circle must not break," he gasped, but it was too late. The moment Marcus recoiled from the table, the room exploded into chaos. The shadows surged forward, wrapping around his throat like spectral hands. He choked, his eyes bulging as his feet lifted from the floor. Lillian screamed as Alan convulsed violently, his hands clawing at his own skin as if something beneath was trying to escape. A voice, guttural and unnatural, slithered through the void. "You should not have called us." Victor thrashed, blindly searching for the candle. His hands found only the ice-cold surface of the table, slick now, as if coated in something wet. Then a hand, small and freezing, grabbed his wrist. He screamed. Lillian fell to the floor, gasping as something unseen yanked her legs out from under her. Alan's body jerked upright, but his eyes were wrong. Black, bottomless voids that reflected nothing. He turned his head toward them in a slow, jerky motion, a smile stretching too wide across his face. "We're staying," he whispered, but it wasn't Alan's voice anymore. Victor's breath hitched as he stared at the mirror. He saw himself sitting there, unblinking, his lips moving as if still reciting the ritual. "This isn't real," he whispered. Alan, or the thing wearing his skin, tilted his head. "No," it agreed. "This is forever." The last thing Victor saw before the darkness consumed him was the reflection of the door, wide open in the mirror's world, leading into an abyss. Then, the candle's flame flickered back to life. The seance room was empty. The guests were gone. Only the overturned chairs and the lingering scent of decay remained. No one ever found Victor, Lillian, Alan, or Marcus after that night. The police entered the house the next morning, responding to a neighbor's complaint about strange noises. But they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just an empty room with a cold candle and chairs knocked askew. And the mirror. The authorities, baffled, declared it a missing persons case, though whispers in the occult community spoke of something far worse. The seance had broken something, called forth something that should never have answered. Decades passed, and the house remained abandoned. Some who dared enter reported strange occurrences, furniture rearranged overnight, whispers in the dead of night, the mirror's surface shifting as though it breathed. One man claimed he saw the séance guests inside the glass, sitting at the table, their lips moving in silent prayer. He ran and never returned. Eventually, the house was condemned, left to decay. But the mirror was removed. No one knows where it went. Some say it was locked away in a private collection. Others whisper that it was sold to an unsuspecting buyer. And somewhere, even now, it waits. A reflection that does not belong. A séance that never truly ended. A voice in the dark, calling for someone new to take their place.